All right, it's another Monday. So welcome. It's June 9th. I have lost track of what episode. I got to get back on that. Like what episode we're on, like episode 38, 39, wherever we are of Coffee Talk. Um, not a lot in the news for this last week. So at summertime, this always happens. Things slows down a little bit, but I can always find something to complain about or to share or any of those things. And today or this week or past week, I don't know what the best way to say that is no exception. Just a few things we're going to run through and talk about today. Some of it estimating, some of it legal, some things. I had a lot of feedback from last Monday's class from the SIU departments of multiple insurance companies, several of them very upset that I had laid out the rules for how SIU investigations go. But anyway, so take it as a playbook. All right, what we're going to talk about this week. Fentanyl testing, total losses, fentanyl exposure, what your legal requirements are there. New Jersey is putting forward another right to appraisal bill. I'm a big fan. We're gonna talk about this one and some possible little issues that may come up with the current language. Now, usually first submission language is never what the final language is. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about speeding by make, model, year, and probably why you should pay attention to what you read. Abandoning ship, another load of vehicles out into the ocean has now been abandoned. And then we're going to talk about a Mazda recall and not sort of, but we are going to talk about what that means to estimators and why estimators need to be paying attention to these recalls as they come up, and what that process looks like. So let's get to it for this week. Fentanyl testing. All right. We've talked about this a lot. We talked about it a couple of years ago. In fact, 2023, we talked about it frequently. We have a total loss class, and then we have a stolen, it's not necessarily total loss class, but it's a stolen recovery class, and how you estimate vehicles that have been stolen recovery. That's available. We teach you, we go through it all. And the reason why we do this, well, Repair Driven News put out a little article kind of talking about some recent experience of one of their members around fentanyl testing, insurance companies not wanting to pay for it in recovery, and then why it's just so important. Like, I mean, fentanyl testing is expensive. Any drug testing. This isn't new. We used to test when meth was a big thing. And people were stealing cars and we used to say they were cooking meth in them, but they were more the transporting meth supplies, etc. We would get stolen recoveries back with meth issues. We would get rental cars. I mean, I know, so the rental agencies dealt with this a lot. And so we were doing a lot of testing back then, and it's way more expensive. I remember I used to pay maybe $500-600 to have a car tested. And now the average is going to be $2,000 to $3,000 to have these vehicles tested for this. And that seems like a lot, when you're an insurer, when you're a claims person, and you're looking at a recovery. I think a lot of us in the shop look at it and we think body damage. And if there's no body damage, we think about just like cleaning the interior. But there are some issues with that and some things that shops need to think about. And most of that is exposure to there's exposure to my employees. So, and I'm inspecting total recoveries or theft recoveries. I want to be a little careful whether I'm the porter, whether I'm the estimator, the technician, whatever it is. We don't just jump in cars and start, wheeling them around the lot or doing a lot of things. We want to be pretty careful with the way that we touch and handle things. Our painters wear, gloves for a reason, to protect themselves from the chemicals that are within the paint, and all that. And so usually when I'm looking at a recovered theft, I've got gloves on. Sometimes, usually if I look around and I don't think there's like a lot of like a dust exposure or whatever, I'm not on a mask, but I'm definitely just not reaching in and touching steering wheels and center consoles and all this stuff when it comes out. Contact fentanyl is a real thing. I mean, it's something out there, and I agree with the people that are online and saying this is so rare. It's one of those things. Right. But I don't want to be the one of the rare ones. Like I don't want that for me. I don't want that for your shop. And I know I can't imagine any insurer wants that for a consumer, or the any other people, not just the driver, but other people that would be in the vehicle. And what happened with that? And so where are we talking about? Where does that come from? Why do we have so many naysayers? Well, in 2023, we had a lawsuit brought by a law firm in Florida against an Airbnb. And basically a toddler. And you can see that picture if you're not watching, if you're not listening on the audio version, if you do get a chance to watch the video version, wherever that you can see it on YouTube, definitely. I always tell people I get so emotional about some of these things, post-repair inspections, accidents, and then these things because this is what I deal with in these things. Is I'm always with the families and with the other things, and I think sometimes we don't in this industry, particularly on the collision side, when we're talking about some of these lawsuits, we think of it as a car and not as people and humans. And so this beautiful little child passed away after a fentanyl exposure in an Airbnb. So we all know, and in fact, this article even talks about it from the law firm that it's kind of well known that a lot of people will rent out Airbnbs and throw wild parties, or you'll do things in the Airbnbs, sort of like hotels that you won't do in your own home. And then we go back to rental cars and theft recoveries that, so the article from the Bodyshop talked about when this car got recovered, the interior was very disheveled and dirty and whatever. And the customer's concern was that, well, somebody had been living in this car for the 30 days while the car was gone. It had been somebody's home. And hey, I'm a little scared to get back in this. What other biohazards, human, whatever, bio spit, whatever was in the car beyond just drug abuse. And so they wanted to get it tested. And in this case, the previous renters of the Airbnb obviously had thrown some sort of an event. The house wasn't cleaned as well. This toddler was walking around or crawling around on the ground and was exposed and in the bed. So laid down when they were taking a nap. When he went to check on the baby later that day, was not breathing, and had some foam. And the parents they took her to the hospital, and the hospital ruled that it was a fentanyl exposure. So what does that mean for body shops? Well, when you read through what this kind of the law firm that put out the paperwork and said, hey, here's why we're suing Airbnb. Obviously, that was probably better money than just the people that maybe owned the rental. I think about this, OEs. Hey, you OEs that are doing certified network, certified collision repair, you technically could be Airbnb in this case, right? You're this big parent group that's certifying these shops or saying to consumers that these shops are training or they're great or they're whatever. But so this law firm sued Airbnb. They didn't sue the actual owner. Well, I'm sure they're named, but basically it says that, hey, you gave the guest false and misleading sense of safety and security because you advertised that you have an enhanced cleaning process by just saying we have an enhanced cleaning process. No one gave any details of what that enhanced cleaning process was. I think about the collision repair business. We'll write on our estimates that we did an interior clean in detail. Well, sometimes what you write is worse than what you didn't do or you didn't write. So you put that you did a cleaning on there, but then if you didn't check for exposure of a drug and then have an abatement process for that drug, then what were you advertising? I think sometimes about our some shops that advertise that we're OE certified and trained in our factory. I love it when it says factory trained technicians. So there's a lot of things that we put on our website sometimes that in our industry could be misconstrued or could be considered false and misleading. Like we're putting customers into this sense of this false sense of security that we're supposed to know what the hell we're doing. And then half the time we're our own worst enemies. I was driving back from Texas yesterday, and while I'm driving, I'm reading this argument I'm having with obviously I'm going to say kid, maybe in the 20s, on the Collision Hub Facebook page about what they think they know about a car from a photo and what is or isn't done. And I'm thinking, why in the hell would anybody not want to get paid to like check for things. Like we're not saying whether that's going to have damage or not have damage, but damn it, we're going to check for it before we just put the customer back in the car. And there's a lot of things that we should do. And a lot of us don't do it because we go, well, we didn't get paid for that. Insurance company's never going to pay for that. I don't care, right? Like you gave the customer a false sense of security that you were going to do a good job, that you were going to put their interest first, that you were going to make sure something was safe. And so recovered thefts are one of those where you just testing for drug exposure is just, going to kind of be. In this case, what the attorney said that I thought was very, very interesting as I was reading through that, and this was 2023. Now, I haven't seen anything else, and I've occasionally gone back and kind of Googled and looked for this one. I haven't seen any other thing around it. I'm going to say this probably settled pretty quickly. There's a lot of other kind of suits against Airbnb out there. This one seems to have sort of gone away. I wouldn't have taken this one to trial either. I mean, that beautiful little child, and what are we going to say? What are we going to do? Juries at some point want someone to be accountable. And the only way a jury can make somebody accountable is through a financial judgment. You're so mad that because there's been a loss or there's been an injury or whatever, someone has to pay. I mean, we all have that mentality sometimes, and we've said those things. Somebody's going to pay for this, right? When juries get that way, that gets expensive for a lot of parties. So a lot of these will settle. I'm going to assume this one probably settled as well because I haven't seen anything get it. But what I like to say is that basically Airbnb should have known that this was a practice common with rentals, things that people did. You turned a blind eye to it for basically profit, right? Like, hey, if we really tried to come up with a way to really address this, it's just going to cost too much money. And so we're just kind of going to skip around it. And it basically said failing to even warn. So in other words, there wasn't even a warning, failing to even warn guests and parents of the known risk of fatal drugs like fentanyl may encounter in the rentals. Lastly, the complaint alleges that Airbnb failed to warn the guest about rentals on its platform that have hosted parties in the past. And there's the law firm that's representing them. So that's just something, as an economy kind of, I think back in 2007, 2008, there's a lot of like joyride theft. There's a lot of temp transportation theft, people that don't have cars and they steal them to drive to wherever they want to go and then they abandon them on the side of the road. So we get some of these stolen recoveries that aren't necessarily, there was the days when cars were getting stolen and driven straight to a port somewhere. When you have a stolen recovery or you have something that's a vandalism or any of those things, you've got to get it tested. At least if you're not going to get it tested, if you're not going to fight for that and let the customer really make the decision. I mean, in the case that Repair Driven News had mentioned, the customer decided to pay for it. The insurance company refused. It was $2,000 to do the testing. The customer was so concerned. Like, I would hate to think that there was something that had gone on in the back seat of a recovered theft. We do a vacuum, wipe down the surfaces, give it back to the customer, and maybe I've got kids in the back that are like sticking their hands between the seats or doing whatever, and they get an exposure much like that child did in that Airbnb. I would hate that. You guys would hate that. We talk about that in glass cleanup too, like broken glass, and it gets everywhere, and that's why, if you're going to clean it, it's going to be super expensive. You're going to spend $6,000-$7,000 cleaning an interior car with broken glass in it, so it's why most of them end up totaling. But you wouldn't want that either. So this was a great article and a great reminder to kind of throw back and think about it, going, hey, we're going to probably see more of these claims as 2025 goes on, 2026. I don't think any of us are expecting a miraculous economic turnaround anytime super soon. Don't get lazy. Don't get lazy, specifically as an estimator, and just get in the habit of doing a 2-hour detail interior or a $150 or $225, because somebody's going to question you on, well, what did that include? What did you do? And then a consumer's going to go, well, I would have thought that they would have just known to test for this. And then they said that they cleaned it, but clearly they didn't clean it because we had an exposure. And, maybe it's a sickness. Maybe it's more. When we were dealing with the methamphetamine issue, it was mostly you get in the car and you start to get a headache, and like you're like, why do I feel so bad? It was just the fumes that were coming out of like the trunk or in the other areas. So something to definitely keep an eye on, and remember, there's always a deeper edge to it. I would have, when repair. You can go and find that article in Repair Driven News, and they have a couple of click throughs. I would have liked them to link out to that Airbnb article because that's really something that we as shops have to think about because we're kind of just like the Airbnb. Like we get the vehicle and we're supposed to clean it and give it back. Just like you were supposed to clean that rental house before the next people came in. So if you're not aware of it, you can go read that case as well. So let's talk about something I love to talk about, right to appraisals. It's one of those things where I think we can fix the whole industry just typically, I don't want to say the industry, but we can fix a lot of things that are wrong right now if everybody had a right to appraisal and if we had a mandatory disclosure bill. So those are my two. So I am grateful to see a lot of places moving forward. And I think every time you write a bill, there's some issues. I mean, so New Jersey has pushed forward their right to appraisal bill. Very interesting because it's coming kind of on the tail of Rhode Island is dealing with some issues with they passed one a year ago and there was a lot of problems with it. Now they're trying to fix it. They're dealing with the problems of a poorly written bill actually getting passed. And so now we're watching as Rhode Island pushes forward. When this came out last week, I got several text messages and emails, and some people were like, I can't believe they did this. There's just a few little things in there that I don't want to say that I don't like. I mean, it's actually not terribly written, right? I think there's some things that somebody tried to overwrite or overcompensate for that may come back at a later date. So this is actually it, Senate Bill 4534 in New Jersey. So Repair Driven News does link to this. You can go click that article and you can link out to it and read it yourself. There's a little bit of, in B there, it says if the policyholder and the insurer disagree as to the actual cash value. I don't like the and, I usually like a or. Because if as an insurer, I'd just be like, I don't disagree with my estimate. I think my estimate was fine. But in that case, we do disagree with the customer's estimate. So I want to be very clear. Right to appraisal is a policy benefit. This isn't like a claim on a coverage. So we talk about right to an assignment of proceeds and an assignment of benefits are two completely different things. And I've recently found some shops that are taking an assignment of proceeds and they think that allows them to be basically the lead in this right to appraisal process. Like, well, I'm going to step in the place of the customer. Right to appraisal is a policy benefit. It is a condition of the policy. It's not a coverage payout. So an assignment of proceeds means that you're taking the right to receive the proceeds of a settlement. Doesn't mean that you get to be a part of the settlement or have an opinion or do a lot of things. It just as you're getting those proceeds of that. An assignment of proceeds will not allow a shop to participate in an RTA. If the customer disagrees, like hey, the customer's presentation of here's what I want to get paid. So a Bodyshop writes an estimate. In theory, we give that estimate to the customer. That's the customer saying I want to get paid for it. It's not us saying we want to get paid for it, basically. So I think it's fine. You may have an insurer like poke around at that a little bit, but very rarely first language is the past language. All right, the one thing that we want to pay attention to is competent and disinterested appraiser. I get a lot of kind of calls on this one now. As we go back and forth. And this goes both ways. So competent and disinterested appraiser, they come down here in section, like the lower section, and they're trying to like define it because it says paragraph D, as used in this section, a competent or disinterested appraiser, and then they go on. And what they actually write makes no damn sense whatsoever. So it means an appraiser that is impartial and without financial interest in the opposing party. Like, huh? When conducting an appraisal on behalf of an insurer, policyholder, or third-party claimant. So just this went a little too far. That one's a little screwy. That language will get changed. But a competent and disinterested appraiser. So first of all, when they tried to define it, what's competent mean? So I guess we're just going to go with the general definition of competent. Competent could just basically mean I can tie my shoes. It doesn't mean that I'm competent in automotive repair. I'm competent in that particular make. I understand estimating. None of that means that. I think sometimes shops think that competent means, oh, they're supposed to know cars and they're supposed to know that, whatever. That's not what that means. So the typical, like, undefined definition of competent will just basically be you would pass competency like if you think, are you competent to stand trial? That's basically what competent would mean. So if you want competent in your bill to mean something else, then you want to define that. Typically, you don't. You don't want to get too far. Then you end up with basically experts, which to call yourself an expert, you can't just do that. Like I can't just decide I'm an expert. People always ask me, are you an expert in collision repair? And I go, God, no, right? There's no way I would pass a hearing. So if we're talking about a Daubert or a Fry hearing to be determined an expert, those aren't that easy, right? Like I could do well at claims. I would probably pass a hearing to be a claims expert, but I would not, pass a hearing to be a body repair expert. I don't know. I guess anybody can get. But I think we throw those things around. You'll hear a lot of people say I'm an expert. A lot of people think that because you were in a body shop for years or that you wrote you were an estimator for years, that makes you an expert. It does not. It typically makes you a terrible expert. And we typically don't recommend anyone use you for anything. So those things happen. But a competent and disinterested appraiser. So here's where disinterested comes in, and here's what shops need to be aware of. As an insurer, I will look for how often from your particular facility the same appraiser pops up. So I will also look if the appraiser is attached to you in some other format. So let's say you happen to be, I don't know, a board member of an association, and you are using maybe someone that is a sponsoring member of your association. So this particular claims adjusting or independent adjusting firm is a participant in your association and you're a board member of that association. I can make a case that you two aren't disinterested because you have a business relationship in another capacity. Even though we'd probably say financial interest because you want to be a sponsor and you're thinking that being a sponsor is going to get you more business, etc. So that's a particular issue. It may be an issue if you do multiple ones from the same shop. So I've gotten involved in some cases have come to my desk where one particular facility is always using the same appraiser. Well, if over a certain time I can show that you had a certain number of appraisals and they all came from this shop, well, now you have a financial interest in continuing to get work from that shop. When you are a independent appraiser, technically hired by the customer, sometimes what you have to do is I don't want to say conflict with the shop, but they're not your customer. You're not worried about pleasing them. If I'm finding that you're always working for them, and then I can go deeper and find that you're actually getting payments with like their credit card or whatever, that disinterested even gets harder. So when you have this disinterested language, either a policy or you have it in a statute, then as a shop, you have to start being very conscientious of how your consumer is finding the person that's going to represent them, how many opportunities for different people are the customer given, what's the selection process, what's the payment process, all of these things. When these things pass, they're great. But by no means should any state or anyone think that immediately insurers are just going to be like, okay, well, I guess we got to do right to appraisal and everything now. They're going to dig their heels in and try to figure out a way to like lessen it. DRP is a great one. You'll never see DRP, right to appraisal, like if Bodyshop started doing that, which I would love. It would be awesome. But I think you would start to see a whole other level of problems, or you'd get kicked off the DRP or whatever. So now I'm dealing with this smaller band of claims that are outside of my DRP, and I'm typically going to find it's one or two body shops within a market that are doing those, or it's always their customers. And then now I'm going to go look at the totality of who's on their files and digging in. So like we talked last week about what'll open an SIU investigation when you're invoicing ADAS. If suddenly you're doing a lot of RTAs and your person's not disinterested, I'll start getting them, hey, you can't use that guy. I can prove that they are definitely an interested party. So think through those things. Now, the flip of it is I've done that also with insurers. I have like a particular insurer that's always hiring the same IA. That guy's being a jerk. He's being a pain in my ass. All right, well, he's no longer a disinterested party. Clearly, he wants to please the insurer so that they will continue to hire him. He's had X number of claims, like the insurer's not like passing this around. There's clearly a business relationship. There was a case years ago out in St. Louis, where basically an appraiser on a recording says, "Hey, if I write the estimate the right way, they'll stop hiring me, and I'm not going to make any money." So those situations definitely happen. So that's something to keep in mind. Some of the other things about this one that's kind of interesting to think about is so they try to put some time constraints around it, which are cool. I like that. Keeps these from going on. But basically, the way they've written it is like, the party receiving the written demand, so whoever invokes it, the person that receives that invocation has 20 calendar days before they have to pick and notify who they picked. Okay, so that's 20 days. Now, after they've picked it, there's another 20 days before those people have to make a settlement offer. It doesn't say they have to agree. It just says you have the selected appraisers shall within 20 business days, so not calendar days, 20 business days, appraise the loss, stating separately the actual cash value. So, but then there's nothing that says, okay, well, after you do that, how long do these guys get to go back and forth before umpire is done? So basically, I've got 20 days, then another 20 days. So I'm potentially 40 days into this. And then there's this undefined amount of time that may or may not pass before we would go and select the umpire. And then umpires can sometimes be quick. Sometimes umpires take forever to render their decisions, which may be another 20 or 30 days. If you can't agree and you have to go to a judge to get a judge to appoint your umpire, then, so you may be 90 to 120 days into this. I think we would all like to try to move that a little faster. We have noticed lately with a lot of RTAs, the insurers are just attempting to push everything to umpire right now, like almost refusing to do anything. And I think they just want to make, in their mind, they believe that this is body shops pushing this and paying for it. And so they're just wanting to make people spend more money. I always say that insurers have more money to spend than you do. So it's very, very important that whoever is representing the customer pushes the time frame and pushes that calendar a whole lot faster, and then is pretty clear at who's paying this bill, and that your actions are causing a customer to incur an additional loss above and beyond a deductible, and some of those things. So pretty important. Overall, the people that were texting me, so you guys, I know you're listening, I don't necessarily have a problem with this one. I think it's pretty well written. I would like more definition of what happens after that dead period of 20 and 20, and then how long is that before we go to umpire. But regardless of when there is time constraints and there isn't time constraints, then it's really up to the IA to move that calendar along. And so it's pretty good. I think we need to work a little bit more on our definitions if we're going to try to have definitions within this bill. Maybe be a little bit different, but the disinterested party will always, shops push it sometimes. They get some guy they like that they've heard of online, and we look up and that one appraiser's done 20 or 30 RTAs for one shop, and it's like, I got you. And I'm like, I guarantee you I'm about to find a bunch of checks or a payment plan where it was not the customer that was paying that particular person. And then I'll probably get your adjuster's license if it's a licensing state. I mean, there's a whole lot of things that'll go on from there. So you don't want that to happen to your customer and them get caught up in the middle of that. So shops, if you have put yourself in this position where you're the one pushing and pressing and doing all these things, just sit down and make sure you have a process and it's clean and it's not going to get caught up in this interested version kind of thing. Because that's really what I hear a lot of from the insurers lately is they're going to start pushing that interested party thing. All right, so this was fun. We talked several months ago maybe about how you should always check what you're freaking reading, right? In this industry, there's so many like advertisements that come out looking like a press release or whatever, and our press just blindly shares that crap without anybody thinking of where'd that come from, and maybe was there an ulterior motive to this. And that doesn't happen just in our trade press, that happens in any trade press. It's like journalism is kind of dead and everybody's just into copying and pasting and nobody looks at it. So this thing came out in automotive Property Casualty Claims 360. So it's an insurance magazine. It covers property and casualty claims and auto and home and just a little bit of everything. So this thing was in here, and it was basically, the article was like, what brands of cars, or so what cars are most common for getting speeding tickets or for speeding being the cause of their accident, right? So I'm reading this and it's okay. This thing came out June 3rd of 2025, and I'm like, oh, that could be a cool article. And so instantly, it's like, what cars speed the most and cause the most accidents? And I'm like, Challenger, right? Like hands down, Charger, Challenger are going to be 1 and 2 on the list, right? So it lists this convoy law, injury, and medical malpractice lawyer. So obviously this was an advertisement. Okay, here's whoever, if this was real, whoever did this, they were supposedly searching speeding tickets between 2021 and 2025 that were in different states. All right, so you look first, in the number 10 vehicle on the list is a Chevrolet Tracker, and I'm like, yeah, okay. So between 21 and 2025, estimated speeding violations were 34,200. And I'm thinking, oh, this could be a pretty cool article. Now, as you flip through it, though, I'm like, all right, these people have no clue what they're talking about, because on the list was also the Dodge Neon. Like what, 90, when was the last time that thing was produced, and how many of those could be on the road, that there's actually more speeding tickets between 2021 and 2025 attributed to a Dodge Neon than a Chevrolet Tracker. And then the Buick Roadmaster was on there too. So if the Dodge Neon wasn't enough, like, the Buick Roadmaster was on the list. So you pretty much figure, like, as you get through slide number 3, you're like, ah, damn, clickbait, right? I got caught. But most of this was this law firm wanted to have something that would make people click through and go to their website or talk about them, which is what happened, because the Claims magazine shared this. And they had a great entry to it, to like how Progressive has studied certain models and how accidents are more expensive. And so if the vehicle's more prone to speeding, the premium might be higher. And whoever wrote that obviously didn't know anything about cars either, because they didn't flip through it long enough to go, yeah, no, I have a hard time believing Dodge Neons between 2021 and 2025 got more tickets than Chevrolet Trackers for speeding. Like, and then I got a harder time believing Buick Roadmaster was ranked above the Dodge Neon, if that doesn't blow your mind enough. But you can go click on that. You probably just search that title, it'll take you right to the article. So just be very, very careful what you read. Right now in business, anybody, clickbait and people want attention. I'm like the master of actually, I'm not that good. If I was better at it, we'd have more views. But that's going to happen a lot, and it's unsuspecting. So it pops up in trade magazines, and Casualty Property, 360 is a sort of a distinguished magazine. And they accidentally shared this, right? Or, unbeknownst to them, the intern that was working this summer I don't know what a Dodge Neon is, right? Or where they last made it, or any of that stuff. So probably the law firm had an intern make the whole damn thing up, anyway, and they didn't know what they were searching for. So be very careful. And when you read anything right now, just ask yourself, all right, what's the source? And then what's in it for them if I believe this? And that, you'll see paint companies come out with articles right now. You'll see software companies. I mean, just anybody trying to get you to do anything. Well, speaking of stories that came out that were not fake, but true, we have another ship carrying EVs that was abandoned in the Pacific. So this one was south of Alaska. I think 80 something vehicles on there were full EVs, and another like 780 of them were hybrids. It caught fire, and they abandoned the ship on June 3rd. So this was south of Alaska. So that's another. Well, we had the big Porsche, the ship carrying all the Porsches that caught fire and sunk, and then now we have another one off the coast of Alaska. So you can get in there and read more about that article as well. This one was on Automotive News. Another. They cover most of the OEs. An interesting article in there that was in Automotive News last week that I didn't talk about, because it was like, yeah, too many layers. One of Nissan's suppliers. You have all these different suppliers that supply the plants so we can build the cars, et cetera, whatever. One of Nissan's suppliers is filing for bankruptcy, so they're going to file Chapter 11 in the U.S. I want to keep an eye on that. I think so many of us are focused on tariffs right now, and what tariffs are going to do to like parts and then vehicle sales, that there's this cascading just economy, right? Like, people aren't buying cars, and so some of these companies that support these OEs are struggling. They're a cash flow dependent business as well, kind of just like Bodyshops are. So they're struggling, and once that supply chain sort of breaks, it just all starts to, I think of it like a what do we call it? Like a suspended bridge, right? When everything's connected, that bridge is great, but one string breaks and the whole bridge goes. And so we're watching some of that, and kind of keeping an eye on these first tier or tier one suppliers to the OEs that are looking at financial trouble. They are trying to sell or get a round of investment, and they believe that this Chapter 11 will keep them afloat, I guess, for a while, which apparently did not keep our ship afloat with all the EVs. You know, if you're going to be a body shop and you're going to store EVs and hybrids, I know there's a lot of people that go, good, there's no more fires in EVs than there are in gas cars. I'm thinking, God, it feels like there is, right? Like I don't know. But if you're going to store these cars, if you're going to have them on the lot or whatever, then you're going to have some safety protocols just to protect yourself. We were talking in our 20 group, so we have an insurance and customer relations 20 group that meets, and I was asking a lot of the guys, okay, well, tell me what you should have in your garage keepers, you'll have them like a coverage for vehicles on property. So if your shop burned to the ground or whatever, and you had 50 cars on the lot, how much money do you have? So if that fire was your fault, then you're covering those vehicles, right? You're going to get sued for them. Had a person ask me a question last week, also a dealership, and we got hit with hail, and now some people are telling me I have to pay for their cars. I'm like, you might have to pay for the cars. So limits, and everybody had a different limit. Some people had one that said extended a loss. And I was like, that's a great policy. Some people were like, I got $200,000 of coverage, and some people were like, I got $1 million worth of coverage. Whatever that is, walk out on your lot right now, count how many cars you have there, estimated ACVs, and go, okay, if the whole thing went away today, do I have coverage? Well, if you don't secure a hybrid or an EV and there's a fire issue, and it catches the whole, I mean, there's no like putting these things out, right? So you need to think about exposure. I have a hybrid Jeep. And unfortunately, it seems to be in the dealership every week. I've had this code that since 2023 they can't seem to get rid of. I have like 6 cars. I collect 90s models, Tahoes and Chevy trucks or whatever. So I've always got something to drive. I haven't really cared about it too much, but recently it went back in, and now it's got a major hybrid problem, and they're like, we can't let you take it. And I'm like, well, I'm gonna need a loaner then. I mean, so and I was like, so what's the fix? And they well, we don't know. We're gonna have to have Stellantis figure it out and then send us an answer. And a Stellantis engineer has come and looked at my vehicle, and so they're working on it. But I mean, even they're like, I'm like, where is it? They're like, way out there. So when I went to get my loaner, they were like, we need your proof of insurance so we can give you the loaner. I was like, great. Where's my car? And she was like, what do you mean? I said, well, I keep my insurance in the glove box. I mean, like, I'm one of those people. I do have that really cool like folder where you keep all that stuff in. She was like, no, I'll go get it for you. Awesome. I'll sit here and drink. It's amazing. So she's gone for about 30 minutes. In the process, I'm like, my agent is a friend, and I called him. I said, dude, send me a coverage card. He's like, why? I go, I don't know. She's been gone 30 minutes. I have no idea if she took lunch or what's going on. So she finally comes back in, and she's like, I couldn't find it. I'm like, what? Like, well, they told me it was out back, but I couldn't find it. And I walked around and I thought maybe your remote would go off. So apparently it's not only in the back, it's like way in the woods. And I don't blame them. I would put it back there too. So if Stellantis told me this thing's probably going to catch on fire, I'd have it so far away from anything that if it did catch on fire, it would just, make a lot of smoke, but it wouldn't hurt anybody else's car, and it wouldn't hurt the dealership. So if you are going to have EVs and hybrids, and that's part of your business model, or you're going to service those, just make sure that you've thought through where you're going to park those suckers. And then what's your daily like do you go if it's going to be in the shop for a week or two, do you check the battery pack? Do you have a process for that, or any of those things? This will continue to get more and more interesting. So Mazda Recall. And this one's not a huge one, but it's a slow news week. So 183 Mazda vehicles have been recalled, and it just basically breaks this down. So here's why I wanted to talk about this. Estimators. When we train estimators, one of the first things that I teach them is when a vehicle comes in, I want to know everything there is to know about it, and I want to know more than the customer even knows about it. And one of the first things I do is I always check for recalls. Now, why do you check for recalls? Well, I check for recalls because in my life, my career, I've watched a lot of shops get sued over not checking for recalls or recall related incidents or whatever. So I just said, hey, we're going to check for recalls, right? I used to train my Service First shops to check for recalls. So it's really quick. It's easy to do on the website. You can go to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and you can enter a make and model. You can VINs. You can do a lot of things to see if a vehicle has any open recalls on it. Because if it does, I want to address that before I give it back. Well, here's what we got going on. 24 and 25 CX-30s. 2024 Mazda 3s have airbag issues, and then the 2024 Mazda MX-5 has an indicator light issue. So you're saying, what might that be? Well, basically, you may have, and so this was really fun for me as I was looking for this one. You may have an airbag issue, and guess what? You may not get a light. Can you believe that? Isn't that just like crazy, right? Like, so for everybody that says, no, if you're going to have an airbag issue, the light will come on. So here we have a recall where there is not a light issue. What I liked about this one when I was reading it is they were saying that for a while they thought that it really wasn't, it was a user error instead of a manufacturing error, because the vehicle would be left like in an on position for more than 2 hours. And I went, paint department, right? Like instantly, like these guys know how to kill a battery more than anybody. But they did decide that it actually was a problem. And now we have a recall, but now I have this airbag thing. So if I was fixing this Mazda for whatever, it was in my shop for a bumper, a door, or whatever, I wouldn't want to just necessarily give it back to the customer and go, well, there wasn't any light when there was an open recall. Now, the other thing about this open recall that's very interesting is that there is the notification period. So they've made this announcement to the national press, but the notification period to the owner, so when you get that little piece of mail that nobody reads anyway, is for July 28th. So if you're waiting for a customer to, and you think that that's something the customer needs to be responsible for, this is July 28th before we're June 9th, right? Like, and they're not even going to get this piece of paper until July 28th. And we know it's a problem right now. And some of you have those makes and models in your shop. So estimators, you always need to look at the VINs, you need to look at models, you need to look for open recalls, because that's liability. I mean, but beyond liability, it's being a good human, being a good Samaritan, being a good neighbor, as I used to tell my estimators, right? Like we don't want to give somebody back something that they could be in danger. Now, it's an opportunity for service. Like maybe you can do these things. They're going to replace the sensors and then do all the calibrations. It's a trip to the dealership. It's something to put into play and just say, Miss Smith, we've been made aware your vehicle has a recall. You may call the dealership and they may go, hey, sensors are on back order, we can't get any. Okay, well, I now probably need to put together some paperwork where the customer signs and says, hey, they understand that vehicle's not, perfect right now. Vehicle's not ready, any of those things. So this was a nice one to just talk about, hey, recalls and what happens with them and why estimators need to pay attention. If you want you want to talk about recalls and training your estimators, let me know. We do have it as part of, it's our larger estimating class, but we do have it in there. So let's talk about what's on the shelf. And then this week, I'm going to remember to hit stop share so you can actually see what's on the shelf. Okay, so weekend before last, I was on a football visit with the kiddo, and they got the women's basketball coach. So I'm a basketball fanatic. I am particularly a Tennessee women's basketball fanatic. I grew up playing basketball and played in college. Would have loved to play at Tennessee. Wasn't that good. You can see on the shelf over there some Tennessee stuff. And then if you could see this whole wall, it's Pat Summitt. And probably up there is a signed Pat Summitt ball. But Kelly Jolly, who's now Kelly Harper, was the point guard for Tennessee when they won 3 national championships. And amazing player. And she's now the coach at Missouri, the women's basketball coach at Missouri. And so Missouri's football coach made an effort to make sure that I got to hang out. And so Kelly Harper is one of my basketball heroes. So let's talk basketball. One of my favorite books, because I think Pat Summitt was amazing, is this book called Raise the Roof. And she basically she talks about that undefeated season. She talks about three-peat. She talks about her 12 rules, so the definitive dozen for Pat Summitt. And she, like, leadership. And one of the things Pat always talks about was you're constantly adjusting. There's never a one way to lead or to lead your business. Is that, every month, every day, something's going to happen, and you're going to constantly be having to kind of pivot and move. And and what that looks like. And so it's just a really great any of Pat Summit's. Her definite dozen. Always kept like 4 or 5 copies of it, and I realized I've given them all away, and Raise the Roof is what's left on the shelf. So if you get a chance, you can get that on Amazon. You can get the book version of it. It's read by Pat, so you get to hear that voice, which would, that leadership and all she accomplished at the University of Tennessee. But it's a fantastic book, and I'll go back to it a lot. I went back to it in 2007 and 2008. I went back to it and during COVID and kind of, had to refresh myself. And so I think this time is none different. If you're looking for kind of leadership, a new way of seeing the world when when it just seems like there's just not a lot of, what do we do about things? The other thing is I will be this week bringing in a couple of therapists, and we're going to be talking about kind of what's going on in the collision repair industry, but what's going on in the world. And when I teach the negotiations class, I talk about increased diagnosis of depression and mental disorders that are going on. This industry's had a lot of, I don't want to say bad luck lately. We've had a lot of people with health issues. We've had a lot of people pass away from health issues. We've had some people have some heart attacks and they're still with us. But they've been, before the heart attack, lots of stresses and everything in their life. We've had some people pass from more, we've had some suicide in our industry in the last 6 months. 2007, 2008 was a really hard time, and we're going to see a lot of changes. And so it's real hard to get people in our industry to talk to somebody because that's just not how we are. So these people are going to come in this week, and we're going to try to put a show out as fast as we can. And it's really about you learning how to recognize signs in other people, that somebody that's drinking a lot or somebody that's, suddenly spending a lot of money or doing what there's a lot of things that we can look at when we probably need to ask somebody to go to lunch. And when they may not tell us what's going wrong, but sometimes we can just kind of be there, right? Like, recognizing signs in your coworkers. You probably as coworkers spend more time together than they even spend with their families, and so sometimes you have the ability to recognize things even better than spouses and children, and especially people whose children are older and have left the home and they're kind of empty nesters and a lot of things. There's not a lot of people that see them very often other than you when they come to work. So you literally do spend more time with them. So we're going to talk about that, and I'm hoping to get that episode out this week. So. If you need us, you can always reach us. Get a hold of Melanie, smartest person on the team, and she will answer your questions. And if she can't, well, then she'll get a hold of me and Larry, or we'll find somebody that can answer your questions. Anything we can do to help. Some things we just can't fix right now, but we will definitely get on the phone and let you talk about them. And complain, and we'll complain with you. Always tell me don't call me unless you're willing to hear me bitch as well. So we'll see you next week on Coffee Talk, and then hopefully I'm going to see you a little bit later this week. We're going to have some really good people from some therapist friends of mine that are going to come in, and we're going to talk about warning signs and then things you can do to help people kind of get pointed back in the right direction. We'll see you later, guys. Bye.